Right, normally when you think about Tisha B'Av, it's a story of tragedy, of destruction. Is there a hero in our days that we celebrate / commemorate? There's Moshe Rabbeinu, there's Mordechai and Esther. Like, who's the hero of Tisha B'Av? And I think if you read through the stories and the Gemara about Tisha B'Av, there actually is a clear hero who emerges. And that's what I want to get to today. So to get there, if we look at in Gittin, Nun Hey Amud Bet, which is the primary story that we read about Chorban Bayesheni. Everybody have the source sheets? Okay, we're going to read through the story together and skip a little around to get to the crux. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Mai dichsiv ashrei adam mafachet tabid umaksha libo yipol bara." Why does it say in Mishlei, fortunate is the one who's always mefached? What does mefached mean in this context? Always cautious, nice. Always cautious. Umaksha libo yipol bara. Somebody whose heart is hardened, maybe somebody who's stubborn. We'll have to figure out what that definition is. Yipol bara, that evil will befall. And everything we're about to say is an explanation of this pasuk. So at the end, we'll have to figure out, if we have time, how this fits into this pasuk. And the Gemara brings a number of stories to highlight this. And one of them is Kamsa bar Kamsa Charv Yerushalayim. That because of Kamsa and bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. If you look by the next, underlies a Kamsa bar Kamsa Charv Yerushalayim. What is the story? Dahu Gavra derachame Kamsa ubal debabe bar Kamsa. So there was a guy who had a friend whose name was Kamsa, and he had an enemy whose name was Bar Kamsa. Now, I always thought in this story it was just striking, just because whoever says that you have an enemy, like it's so foreign. Like, is it Batman? Like, who has an enemy? But this guy, the head of the Suda, the Bala Suda that we're about to speak about, he had a friend called Kamsa and an enemy Bar Kamsa. Avid Sudasa, he made a festive meal. Amrle Lishmaya, Zil Aisi Li Kamsa. He said to his helper, go bring me Kamsa. My friend, go bring me Kamsa. Azil Aisi Le Bar Kamsa. And instead, by accident, he brought him Bar Kamsa. Ashka Ashkache Dahave Yasif. So the Bala Suda, the Bala
Suda hates Bar Kamsa.
Hates Bar Kamsa. They're enemies. But he has a friend Kamsa. We never meet Kamsa in this story, which is also interesting because it's like Kamsa Bar Kamsa. We never meet Kamsa in this story. It's just the Bala Suda who remains nameless and his enemy Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa comes to the meal, and the Bala Suda comes and he sees his enemy sitting at his meal. Amrle. Michti hahu gavra bal debava dahu gavra, who my buzz acha kum puk. Is this man who's the enemy of this man is at this meal? What are you doing here? Get up and leave. He's kicking him out. Amarle. So Bar Kamsa says to him, Ho ba'asi shavkan v'yavinu lecha demei ma'ita chilno shetin. Since I'm here. And in other versions of this, he says this actually even sharper. He says, don't embarrass me. Like, since I'm here, leave me, and I'll pay you what I eat and drink. I'll pay you what I'm eating and drinking. No loss for you. Amrle, the Bala Suda says, no. Amrle, yavinalach demei palgo duseich. I will pay for half your meal. Don't embarrass me. Don't kick me out. I will pay for half of this whole festive meal for everyone. Amrle, lo. Amrle, yavina lecha demei kulasu deseich. I'll pay for the whole thing. I will underwrite the entire simcha. Just don't embarrass me by kicking me out in public. Amrle, lo. No. Nakte biyadei, took him by his hands, v'ukme v'ofke, picked him up and threw him out. Amar, so Bar Kamsa said to himself, since the rabbis were sitting, the rabbis were invited, they were guests to this meal. And they were sitting at this meal, and they didn't protest the Baal Asuda's action, Shmamina, Kanichalahu. From here I see that they agreed to it. Yeah, Shtika Koda, they were pleased, they approved of the Baal Asuda's actions. Aizil Ichubu Kartze Be Malka. I'm going to go and what's the right word? Like tattle. I'm going to go and squeal, snitch, be moser. That's good. Be moser to the king. Azal Amrle the Kaiser. He goes to the Kaiser and he says, Mardu Bach Yudai. The Jews have rebelled against you. Okay, he has access to the court. He goes to the Kaiser and he says, the Caesar, and he says, the Jews have rebelled against you. Amrle mi Emar. He says, who says? Amrle Shadilu Korbana Chazis Imak Riven Lay. He said, why don't you send your carbon, your sacrifice, and we'll see if they bring it. Now, in other versions, he says, the Jews don't bring your sacrifices. It's very common for the Roman emperor to send the sacrifices to the, or to have sacrifices in his honor being brought on temples of the places where they've conquered. Right? It was very common.
So the Romans gave the animals for the korbanos?
So usually not. In the case of the Jews, we wouldn't bring the carbon because the emperor is the god. So in the pagan deities, so they would just give it in honor of the emperor. For the Jews, we'd have to give it to Hashem. But we would bring the Roman emperor's animal, meaning in another version of this, the Roman emperor would bring it he would regularly send karbanos. And what Bar Kamsa said was, the Jews are not bringing your carbon. And he said, how do you know? He goes, send one and I'll show you that they're not gonna bring it on. So it wasn't strange for the Roman emperor to send an animal to bring the carbon. That wasn't strange. But Azol Shada Biadeh, Egla Tlasa, so he sent him a choice egel, a third-year egel. Bahadi Dagasi Shada Be'muma. On the way, Bar Kamsa placed a mum in the animal, a blemish. Either b'niv sefasayim ba'amile bedukin shaba'ayin, either in the inner lip or in the white of the eye. Duchta delidan have muma uvelidhu lav mumuhu. Some place where for us it's a mum and for them it's not a mum. Meaning they recognize you wouldn't bring blemished animals on the temple, but he did it in a place where it'd be only problematic for the Beis Hamikdash. So the Romans wouldn't sense it. So the rabbis recognized what happened. Hu sava rabbanan likrove mishum shal malchus. The rabbis realized what happened. They said, regardless, even though there's a mum, let's bring it because of Shalom Malchus. Much more wise, let's bring it for Shalom Malchus. Amrlahu Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. At that moment, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas said, Yomru bale mumim craven lagabe mizbeach. No, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because Yomru, they will say, people will say that you can bring a Baal Mum on the Mizbeach.
We don't do it.
So they thought, Savr Lamiktalei, so then let's kill Bar Kamsa. The Lo Leza Balema, they understood the risk. They understood that if they did not bring it, that there was a real risk involved with the king, with the emperor, with Rome. So they said, well, let's kill Bar Kamsa so he doesn't go and tell. They understood what was going on. But Amarlu Rabbi Zechariah said to them, Yomru meitel mum b'kacham yarag. You can't. Maybe people will say, if you kill him, that the chiyuv for bringing a Baal Mum on the Mizbeach is a chiyuv misa. People will mistake in this. Maybe people will say that. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, they didn't do it. They didn't do anything. They didn't bring it. They didn't kill him. He went back, told the emperor, and they sent the the Roman legions, and that was the beginning of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, "In v'tenuto shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, hechrivu et beitenu v'sarva techlenu v'glitenu ma'artzenu." Because of inventenuto, we'll talk about what that word means. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, the house was destroyed, the heichal was burned, and we were exiled from our lands. What is the word inventenuto? What does that word mean?
Humility?
Humility. Where else have you seen inventenuto? Where else have you seen inventenuto? Say again? For Hashem. What do we say about Hashem?
It's just 3 times that Hashem has that where you find his godless.
Exactly. It's godless. On the one hand, is that he helps the Yasam and Almana, but even though he's so, above and transcendent, his inventenuto is he's helping the Yasam and Almana. So how would you translate that word, if you can? For Hashem? Say again? He contracts himself. He contracts himself. Like he's so grand, and he contracts himself to help the Yasam and Almana. He makes himself small, like a tzimtzum, but not small as in less majestic. Actually, that is his majesty. That is God's greatness. Right? So inventenuto is a tremendously positive word. And yet, it's applied here to Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis and said that because of it, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So what does inventenuto mean here? What would you say? Well, where else do you see Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis? How about that? Anybody know where else you see Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis? By what? You do?
City's capture was Shmuel.
You have Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis? Okay, check that out. Let me know. You can look that up. Where else do you see it? Okay, so in Shabbos, there's also Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis.
With bones on the table.
Exactly, with bones on the table. Shkayach. So with bones on the table, so there's a machlokas Beis Hillel by Shammai. What do you do with bones on the table? And there's two different. The Mishnah says one thing, the Gemara reverses it, but one shita is that you're allowed to pick up the bones and throw it out. The other is you can pick up the table as a kli and shake it off. But what did Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis do? So when he took it, he ate it, and then he spit it out behind, he turned around and spit it out behind the mita, behind the couch that he's in. And when the Tosefta explains what he did, it says, Lo kedivrei Beis Hillel or kedivrei Beis Shammai. He wasn't like Beis Hillel or Beis Shammai. What was he doing? Why did he turn around and spit it out and did it behind the couch? Machmir for the shitas, but it's not just machmir for the shitas. See, if you're machmir the shitas, then you did like Divrei Beis Hillel and like Divrei Beis Shammai. He was not like Divrei Beis Hillel or Divrei Beis Shammai. What was he doing? It's a little nuance different than being machmir for the shitas. What was he doing? Avoiding the question. He was avoiding the question. I mean, the question is, are the bones muktzah or not? Is the kli, is the table? And he, to not enter into the question, turned around, spit it out, and hid the bones that way so they wouldn't take it on Shabbos. And interestingly, the Tosefta there says, it quotes Rabbi Yossi that says, Mishum inventenuto shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, the same line, Sarfa et Echaleinu. So what does inventenuto mean? So we'll get back to that. There's one other time that it's used in another version of the story. We'll get back to it. Let's keep on going.
Isn't there another sheet that says that Kamsa bar Kamsa, father and son?
Arkamta bar Kamta, father and son.
One sheet that says that.
Yeah, who says that? The Marshasas comes to father and son.
Father and son.
Amazing. I didn't know that.
Wow. So, Bar comes
Bar
as the son. Bar comes as the son.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Could be. I didn't know that. Even more amazing. Okay. So go to the next arrow. And Abasikra, Reish Bar Yarnei Jerusalem. Abasikra was the head of the Bar Yonim. Who are the Bar Yonim? They were the Zealots. Okay, they were the Zealots in the city. Bar Achdei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was the nephew, the son of the sister of Yochanan ben Zakkai. Shalach le tebetzin legabai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, "Come to me in secret." Asa he came. Amrlei ad emat avidite hachi v'kataltli la'almei b'kafna. How long are you going to do this? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to Abba Sikra, and you're going to kill us all by famine. What were they doing? So the Romans besieged Jerusalem. There was no food in the city. They burned all of the resources to force the Jews to not be able to ride it out comfortably. And there was a constant infighting in the city about what to do. And Amrlei, he answered, "My Iavid, what can I do? Di'amina lahu midi katlali." If I say anything to the Bar Yonim, they're going to kill me. Now this is a very important ha'ara for you see today, where the leaders don't say anything because the followers are going to kill them, ignore them, or even worse. And it cowards the leaders into silence. Who is the leader in this story, obviously? If the head of the Bar Yonim feels he can't say anything. Amrlei, chazli takanti l'didi di ipuk efshar davi hatzala porta. Give me a way to get out, and maybe I could do an hatzala porta, a partial hatzala. Okay, so everybody remember the story. What happens next? He says, pretend that you're sick, and the shmuah will go out that you died. Your people will carry you. They started to shake him or pierce him, and he said, you shouldn't do that. Also, what will people say? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets out of the city. If you turn the page, it's a Nun Vav Amabed. He gets out of the city. He stands in front of Vespasian. He calls the Melech. Vespasian says, "I'm not Melech." And then a messenger comes and says, "You're just appointed the king." This is actually an important year in Roman history. Everybody know what the year is? The year this happened. This is the year of the 4 emperors. I mean, there was a constant turmoil of emperors in Rome at the time. And Vespasian, this is actually the big transition of the Roman emperor. Anyway, Vespasian at the time became emperor and sent his son Titus to finish the job. But he was so impressed with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he says to him, if you look by the arrow, Amrlei mizil azilna vina shachrina mishadarna. Look, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna send somebody else, his son. But tell me, what can I do for you? So Amrlei, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai famously says, "Tein li yavne v'chachameh." Give me yavne v'chachameh. I want yavne, and I want to save the sages. V'shashilta de Rabbi Gamliel, and I want the lineage of Rabbi Gamliel, the Davidic dynasty, to be saved. Basvata de Meisenle the Rabbi Tzadok, and I want medicine, food and medicine for Rabbi Tzadok, who was fasting, ill, and elderly. So Kariela Rabbi Yosef Yisem Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Yosef, and some say Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yosef say Rabbi Akiva. At the time, said about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Meshiv Chachamim Achor V'Daitam Yisakel. This is an example where even the wise are backwards, and their intelligence is how would you say Yisakel? Flawed or confused or something bad. Like he wasn't thinking straight.
Senior moment.
Why? Cloudy. because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is standing in front of him, he should have said to him, L'shavkinu hada zimna. He should have said, leave. You could have asked for Jerusalem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is standing in front of Vespasian. He's besieging the city. You could have asked for Jerusalem. You could have asked to save the city, the capital, Jerusalem, the Beis HaMikdash. You could have asked for the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, "V'hu savar dilma kuli hai lo avid batol portanami lo." He said, so much he wouldn't give, and then he wouldn't even get hatzala porta, partial hatzala. I mean, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. You ask for too much, you're not going to get anything. And he was worried that he wouldn't get anything. Okay, that's the Gemara. Years later, if you look at the Gemara in Brachos, years later, we're told, Kishachala Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, nichnesu talmidav levakro. And when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the end of his life was sick, and his students came to visit him. Nichnesu talmida levakro. Kivan shiraosam, when he saw them, hitzcha livkot, he began to cry. Armelo talmidav, his talmidim said, Ner Yisrael, Amid Yamini, Patish Chazak, Mifnemata Bocha, the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Why are you crying? What would you have to fear that you're crying? Amar lahem, he says to them, Ilu lifnei melech basar v'dam hayu malichem osi, shayom kan umacha bekever, shem kois alai ein kaso kasolam, v'masrani ein yisur yisur olam, v'memisani ein misaso misas olam, v'ani achol lefaiso b'dvaram lo shachto b'mamon, v'af al pikeni iti bocha. If I was standing just before a king of flesh and blood, whose anger is not eternal, who cannot do something to me, punish me eternally, and if he kills me, it is not eternal death, and I'm able to appease him with words and to bribe him with money, and even so I'd be crying of fear. V'achshav shemalichem osi lifnei melech machayam lachem hakadosh baruch hu shu chai v'kayam l'olmei olamim shem ka'es alai kaso kasolam v'masrani yisro yisro olam v'memitani misaso misas olam ve'eni yachol lefaiso b'dvarim v'lo l'shachto b'mamon v'lo od. Not only that, elo sheyesh lefanai shnei drachim, but there is before me two paths. Achat shel Gan Eden, v'achat shel Gehenna. I have a path to Gan Eden, and there's a path to Gehenna. And ve'eni yodea be'ezim alichem oti. I don't know where they're going to bring me. V'lo avkeh, I should not cry. So, the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was worried about his fate. There are two paths in front of him. One to Gan Eden, one to Gehenna. The Talmidim, they were befuddled. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is worried. Two paths are open in front of him. How could it be? So Rabbi Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, Marenu v'Rabbeinu, Rabbi Soloveitchik, of blessed memory, explains that all of his life Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was worried. Perhaps he made the wrong choice. He was standing in front of Vespasian. You could have asked for anything. He could have saved Jerusalem. His whole life. It wasn't just Rabbi Akiva that said it. He had an inner voice in his head saying, did I do the right thing? I could have saved Jerusalem. I saved the Avnei v'Chachameh. I saved Rabbi Tzadok. I saved Rabbi Gamliel's line. Hatzala Porta. Maybe I could have tried for the whole thing. And he wasn't sure, even at the end of his life, what was going to be the final judgment. That's what he was worried about. So let's pause for a second, and let me ask you, what would you do? Did he do the right thing? Did he choose correctly? What would you ask Vespasian for? As Henry said, these are the future leaders of the. It's what we're investing in.
That's why nobody's answering.
Why?
It's such a
Okay. Right? It's such a.
just like impossible, decision
It's
to
a
answer.
dilemma.
It's a dilemma.
It's also interesting, right? Because the decision was not only like Yerushalayim versus Yavne, it was also very much like being more ambitious or less ambitious. It was like, are we rebuilding and forward looking, and just trying to like make sure we have something, not just Porta in the sense of small. So we know it's over now, so we just have to start back in the beginning with small seeds, or like, are we gonna have redemption? Like, are we gonna keep Yerushalayim? Which is often like the crossroads that a person finds himself in these decisions. Are you in a building stage and thinking long term, but you have very little now? Or are you in a promised land? Like,
There's another complex, very permanent, there's another complexity, because it was in the war already. Body already knew that they were going to go through a period of suffering and colors. Like, there was sort of like a understanding that they had failed. The failure was before them. So what do you do when failure is before you? No, because Baruch was telling you from suffering, period.
Rabbi. Yes.
So truth that we build, or you just go forward based on something that is polluted and not working.
So, Rabbi Nuri, I'll just bring just quickly up to what we're discussing. We're talking about, I started by saying, who's the hero of Tisha B'Av? It's a good chazar also. It's who's the hero of Tisha B'Av, which is usually a phrase we don't think about. And we told the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa and Reb Zcharia ben Avkulas, who Mishum Inventinuto Achrivu et Beitenu, and we left that open what that means. And then we told Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he got before Vespasian. He asked for Yavne v'Chachamea and the Shashal of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yosef criticized him. And now Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is at his deathbed and he's crying and he said, there are two paths in front of me. And Rabbi Soloveitchik explained that what he was worried is maybe he chose the wrong thing. He could have saved Jerusalem. And he chose instead the Hatzalah Porta. So did he make the right choice or not? And I left it to I asked the group, what would they choose if they were in front of Vespasian? Did he do the right thing or not? Should he choose correctly? So Rabbi Kaufman just said, we have to think about Hatzalah Porta not just as partial, but as small, in the sense that he's planting the seeds for a much larger story, for a much larger redemption. So is he turning the page from the past or planting the seeds for the future? And Henry just said that they understood from a prophecy, I'm not sure which prophecy you mean, but they understood that failure was ahead of them. And the question is going to be, how do you deal with failure? Now, and don't get me wrong, I'm saying it's Rabbi Akiva on the one side, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on the other. These are two good shitot. I don't think the answer's so pashut. I was just asking, what would you do if you were in this situation? That's all. What would you, literally you? You're not in the situation. There's no consequences if you. But what would you do if you were in this situation?
Sometimes you have to read the room. He was there with the space.
That's true. That's totally true, by the way. That is totally true. That is totally true. You have to read the room. Sometimes you have to read the room. I love that. Totally true. Totally true. Look, I'll tell you honestly, I've been in these rooms. And you can be prepared. And I prepare before I'm in the room. I also prepare the options because things could move in different directions. And we could talk more about that, but I think that is a very smart point that you have to read the room. That's a very smart point. But just know that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai his whole life was worried. And that at the end of his life, did I make the right choice? Any other thoughts about what to do? So, in my mind, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai is clearly set up as the hero of the story. Clearly. And if he's the hero of the story, who's the villain of the story? I mean, it's clear. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis is the villain of the story. I mean, you couldn't get more clear than Rabbi Yochanan saying, Yishum Inventinuto, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, Hachrivu et betenu, V'sarfa tachlenu v'gilatenu maratenu. Now, what does inventinuto mean in this case? So I mentioned to you that that it was even said about him in Shabbos, in Masechet Shabbos, the Tosefta, when it quotes Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, mentions because of his lack of a position of in avoiding Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and taking a position on Muktzah, is Mishum Inventinuto. So if you look at the Maharatz Chayes, who's a very important person to know, certainly for us, you know the Maharatz Chayes is Tzvi Hirsch Chayes, first half of the 19th century in Galicia. I think he might have been, I could be wrong, he's certainly the only rabbi doctor in the Vilna Shas. He has a doctorate, very well read, in Jewish, not just knowing Shas, but also in the methods of the academy at the time, and so look what he says about Sham Inventinuto Shabbos of Kusa Chrivu Beitenu. So near Bnai, you see that? Everybody have that? Do you have? Lo yadati ma anava hayta bezeh. What was the humility here? Shelo aniach lekabel karbono v'lo lahargo. V'hayelo l'shas lomar tzidkaso o chasidasaso shlebro avalo lashon inventinuto. And he explains, you can look at it together. What he's saying is that he didn't have the strength to paskin halacha lamaisa. He didn't think of himself lo chshiv atzmo legadol ulekvoa b'daito liot osa halacha lamaisa l'tzlo b'harasha. The Maharatz Chayes says Vadai was mutter to bring the carbon. That harasha, it certainly was halachically permitted to bring this carbon with this mum on the Mizbeach, considering all the factors. Where Zechariah ben Avkulis didn't have the sense of the strength of his own character. So how would you translate inventinuto then? He was meek. What? Misplaced humility. Misplaced humility. He didn't have the strength. Now, what you see in Shabbos, even for Muktzah, he didn't want to do it. And interestingly, there's another time where passivity shows up. Where else does passivity show up in this story? The Rabbanan. The whole story comes because Bar Kamsa is kicked out of the Suda, and he sees the Rabbanan sit quietly by. And in Medrash Eicha, when it quotes the story, it says, who is the Rabbanon? Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, the Medrash says, and it was in his hands to protest. He says he could have, but he didn't want to stand up and assert himself. And therefore he let the Baal Suda kick out Bar Kamta. And because of that, the Medrash says, Medrash Eicha, Mishum inventinutos Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis echrivu et beitenu. The same line is used for the Suda. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis, for the Suda, for the Karban, for Shabbos, for the character trait of seeing a situation and not having the courage to stand up and do something about it, that's what caused the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, whether it's Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis as a person, or it's how the Rabbanan didn't have to listen to Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis either. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis wasn't the Nasi, but the fear, and you could hear it in his words, Yomru, what will people say? Everything about Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis was driven by fear. What will people say? Maybe they'll say that you can bring a Balma. Maybe they'll say, maybe. It could be, maybe they'll say that. But that paralyzed him. It paralyzed the Rabbanan, and it led to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Who is the hero in the story? So if you look back in Brachos, so at the end of the story, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai explains why he's worried. Amrlo Rabbeinu Barchenu. They say, the Talmidim say, our Rebbe, please give us a bracha. Amr lahem, Yehi ratzon shetei mori shamayim aleichem kamori basar v'dam. May it be thy will, Hashem, that your fear of heaven should be on you like the fear of basar v'dam. Amrlo Talmidim adkan. Amr lahem ulavai. Halavai, tedu k'shadam over aveira omer shlo yireni adam. Halavai, it's as strong as you're afraid of other people. Then b'shas petiraso, Amar lehem, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to him, Hanu kelim b'fnei hatuma. He understood that he was about to die. So get away, take out the kelim from the house to avoid tuma. V'achinu kisei lechizkiyo melech Yehuda shaba. And prepare a chair. Chizkiya, Melech Yehuda is coming. So, what's the end of the story? What is the implication of Chizkiya coming? He had two paths in front of him, one to Gan Eden and one to Gehenna. So what's happening? Chizkiya is escorting him to Gan Eden. Chizkiya is coming. Why, of all the figures in Jewish history, is Hashem sending Chizkiyo? Is Chizkiyo the person who's accompanying Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? So what do you know about Chizkiyo Melech Yehuda?
He saved Yerushalayim.
When did he save Yerushalayim? Sancheirab, this is Mamish, the parallel story. Jerusalem was under siege. Sancheirab surrounded the city. They were calling out to the Jews in Jerusalem to surrender. There was infighting, the Gemara says, in the Jews in Jerusalem, what to do. Should they surrender or not? What did Chizkiyo do? What did he do?
He built the tunnel.
He dug the tunnel. He didn't surrender. He davened. He resisted. He went for it all. And he saved Jerusalem. Chizkiyo was under siege, and he saved Jerusalem. And he is coming to escort Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So why is he coming? So I believe the key lesson of Tisha B'Av for all of us with the story of Yochanan ben Zakkai is not what you choose. The reason why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a hero isn't because he chose right. The reason Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a hero is because he's in the room. All of those rabbis were in Jerusalem. Every single one of them understood the problem. None of them smuggled themselves out to stand in front of Vespasian. None of them figured out a way to get in front of the general and take a swing. They were paralyzed, like Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis. That was what characterized them. What made Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai a hero wasn't that he necessarily chose correctly. In life, the serious decisions, they're not right or wrong. There are a lot of rights. The question isn't, did you make the right choice? The question is, did you choose? Were you in the arena? Did you rise to the occasion? And the fact that Chizkiyahu came to him was the ultimate comfort. Chizkiyahu, listen, I chose Jerusalem. You chose Hatzalah Porta. It's all good. We're in the arena. And you can't ask for more than that. That's what we ask for. You know, I think about this today, first of all, like on a contemporary level. Happens to be right now the Jews are under attack. Not just in Israel, but throughout the diaspora. Not just from the right, but especially in the left, here in New York, entering into our politics. And I will tell you that the world is waiting for the Jews to show up. What are the Jews going to do about this? You know, I recently wrote an article in the New York Times. It was so interesting. I wrote a guest essay in the New York Times about Zionism and how anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and telling the history of Zionism. And it was interesting to me is that because everybody in our community stopped reading the New York Times, nobody knew about it.
It was online. We all saw it online.
But it's like there are millions of people who read it, but nobody in our community knew about it.
Nobody read
But
it in
it's
the
all
Times.
it's all claimed that Reddit.
No. And it turned out that it trended as one of the top articles for 3 days in the New York Times till Taylor Swift got married. And at one point was the #1 article emailed from the New York Times. Was a positive articulation of Zionism that starts from Abraham. I said Zionism starts from Abraham when God promised him the land, and he said that it will be a blessing to all the families of the earth and the Jews in Israel. Zionism is a bracha, is a blessing not just for the Jewish people, but for all people. And that's what trended. Because people are waiting for the Jews to show up. And that is of the moment. Like, it's not right or wrong, it's being in the arena. And the Jewish people right now need to be in the arena. You know, and if we are, it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just need to show up. That's what is an organized attack right now on the Jewish people. We need an organized effort in response. That's what's happening in the contemporary scene. For you, for our students, what's essential, first of all, there are things for you to do now also, but we're not here to talk about that now. But there are things to do even for that. But it's really to internalize the lesson of what your responsibility is for the future. Because whatever happens now, it'll be different when you're, 5, 10 years. We don't even know what's going to happen with the world with all the technological advances and changes. The situations will change, the circumstances, the challenges. But it's for you to absorb all of the values that are being taught to you, all of the Torah, the ascent, it's learning now. It's learning deeply so that you're filled with the Torah, so that your instinct will be Torah, so that when you're faced in the situation, you'll get into the arena and you'll respond with the lessons and values that have been given to you. That's what your job, your primary job right now is to be, our focus is to be learning and growing so that you'll be ready and prepared when you're out there. And that's essential to keep Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai as a role model for you. Okay? And if I can, perhaps be a little more internal for a moment or individual, and it's also your focus for your own lives. The lesson of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is not to let life happen to you, but it's to make a decision. It's true when it comes to the arena of global politics and the world and the Jewish people, but it's true in your own at your own way that you're an Eved Hashem, right? Don't just follow the trail. Okay, you're going to have a lot of different conflicting values, conflicting possibilities, choices that you're going to need to make in your life. Don't let life happen to you, happen to life. Get in the arena of yourselves and make choices that are correct for you. There was no right answer for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He made the choice that he thought was right. You need to have the courage to believe in your individuality, believe in your strengths, make the decisions, and it won't be right for other people, but it will be right for you. I want to tell you a story, and then I'm gonna open it for questions. If I have a little more time, you can ask. It's a story I'm definitely going to use in the yeshiva at some point. It just happened to me, and it's so interesting. So I have the zchus, the opportunity of speaking with each of the musmachim as they leave, as they get their smicha. So I meet with each individual musmach, and I was speaking to one of them who was going out and he wasn't going into Avodas HaKodesh, he was going into another field. And he said to me that, it was hard for him to make that decision, but he realized that it was the right thing, and his wife helped him reach that point to recognize, that not everybody needs to be learning full-time or teaching full-time, and that your service to Hashem even could be through the work that you're doing, representing the Jewish people and the values, and wherever you are, you're bringing your learning to that world. So I said to him, I'm just interested, not being defensive at all. I have one message that I've been saying to the yeshiva you've been here for 6 years. Literally. I say this message in 12 different ways, but it's basically the same message. Okay? And the message being in your individuality, your Torah Adam, and to bring out into the world in the way that's unique to you, and that not everybody has the same set path, and that especially you could be Makadi Shem Shemayim Barabim and help bring Geula. Everybody find their own path. Did you not hear that when you were was it really your wife that said this to you that made you realize? So he thought about it, and he's like, no, I remember hearing it from you. I'm like, it's okay, you don't have to hurt. But then he said something really amazing. He said, I thought you were talking about the guys in Belfer. I didn't realize you were talking to me in the Beis Medrash. I thought that was actually amazing. I thought, yeah, that's true for the other person. For me, there's one path. That's it. And I think that, the lessons of our yeshiva, and this is what I mean about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai internally, is you really have to find out who you are. And what we believe, and that's the Torah and the Madda, you don't just find out by learning Torah. I know there's great svarim about finding who you are through learning Torah and in the base measures. That's essential, of course, essential, core. But you explore yourself in all the things, in all your experiences, in your secular studies, in your experiential education. You explore who you are. You know, and you have to find your it's not one path. You have to find the right way where you're an Eved Hashem, where you're doing your shlichus, your mission. Your mission is not going to be like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It's not going to be Rabbi Akiva. By the way, if Rabbi Akiva was in the room, maybe he would have chosen something else. That's okay too, right? But you got to have the courage to stand and be who you are. And that's your shlichut, you know, and that's your opportunity. And that's what we, as yeshiva, are trying to do, because as Henry said and I said in the beginning, because we believe in you. We believe in who you really are. We believe in your neshama, the neshama that Hashem created in you. That you will do great things, whatever those things are, for your family, for your community, for the next generation, for Klal Yisrael. And you need to have the strength to stand and be counted in your own life.